We begin this hour with an urgent plea from President Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine.
He addressed a special session of Congress today about the dire situation unraveling in his country. The Ukrainian president began his address to a standing ovation from House and Senate lawmakers. It's only the third time in U.S. history that a foreign leader has been invited to speak to both chambers. During his speech, Zelenskyy praised the efforts of the U.S. following the Russian invasion. However, he says it is not enough, and his country needs more help fending off Russian forces.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, Ukraine is grateful to the United States for its overwhelming support, for everything that your government and your people have done for us, for weapons and ammunition, for training, for finances, for leadership in the free world, which helps us to pressure the aggressor economically. I'm grateful to President Biden for his personal involvement, for his sincere commitment to the defense of Ukraine and democracy all over the world. I am grateful to you for the resolution which recognizes all those who commit crimes against Ukraine, against the Ukrainian people as war criminals. However, now, it is true, in the darkest time for our country, for the whole Europe, I call on you to do more.
Zelenskyy's plea comes as Russia shows no signs of relenting. Surveillance footage from Kiev shows another wave of Russian airstrikes hitting residential buildings early Wednesday morning. Russian forces have been pressing towards Ukraine's largest cities for almost 3 weeks now. Meanwhile, Ukrainian and Russian officials are expressing cautious optimism about their fourth round of peace talks. Both sides are signaling there could be a potential for compromise in the near future.
Optimistic. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab joins us now with more from Lviv, Ukraine. So you are there, Imtiaz. Russian attacks on Ukraine have obviously been punishing. They've been relentless. As I understand it, there in Lviv, you're about 40 miles away from the Polish border. Tell us just what's happening on the ground.
I mean, Lana, you said it, punishing, relentless, and that is really the situation that you see around Kyiv, the capital, of course, where President Zelenskyy gave that powerful, emotional address to that special session of Congress where he evoked Pearl Harbor, 9/11. The scale of trauma and disaster that the U.S. has faced is how he's comparing what Ukraine is facing today. And we also saw that extraordinary video that he played to those members of Congress in which you saw these extraordinary, beautiful cities around this country which have now been brutalized by Russia's onslaught. You see so many incredible buildings and neighborhoods, homes just devastated by that Russian onslaught. And that really is the scene in so many cities across Ukraine. Now here in Lviv, the far west of the country, as you mentioned, very close to the border with Poland. Poland, of course, a NATO country. It's also where we've seen close to 3 million refugees pass through into Poland and indeed elsewhere across Europe and around the world as this humanitarian crisis spreads. And this city, of course, also on edge. Air raid sirens in the early hours of this morning as many people here brace for the war to come here to Lviv as well. Lana, Enrique.
Yeah, Imtiaz, you mentioned that humanitarian crisis. Almost 8% of Ukraine's total population has been displaced in the last 3 weeks. But President Biden is sending an additional $800 million in security assistance to Ukraine. What does that look like on the front line? How is that money expected to be used?
Well, the key word is security assistance, right? This is weaponry, and Ukraine needs a lot of it. Although Russia's offensive, its invasion, has not gone to plan, very evidently not gone to plan, this is still a very strong military, a very strong fighting force. And that is why it's capable of the devastation that we're seeing. And Volodymyr Zelenskyy, in that address, made it very clear what he needed. In fact, he laid it out, the kind of weapons that he needed, some of the more sophisticated weaponry that he believes his military needs. And many can only imagine that $800 million will go to that. And it's not only support from the U.S. that he's receiving, he's also receiving support from the EU. We have to remember just yesterday, three prime ministers from three European countries traveled by train into Kyiv, risking their own safety to bring their own promises to Volodymyr Zelenskyy. So this is a wartime leader who has really emerged as sort of a folk hero for the world as he stands up to Russia and Russia's aggression.
So, Imtiaz, as you heard Enrique say earlier in the introduction, there is more optimism now about this fourth round of peace talks. There is a lot of hope, but we've had that hope dashed in the past. Where do we currently stand?
Yeah, it's very hopeful, but of course, we have to always be mindful that these things can go sideways pretty easily. Volodymyr Zelenskyy said in his usual sort of folksy way that things were going, quote, pretty good. And the Russian leadership was saying that they've made significant progress. Now, that is also very hopeful. Some believe that there is a much more detailed plan in place. We haven't gotten any confirmation as to what that detailed plan is, but we did hear from Vladimir Putin much earlier today where he rubbished any idea of a plan. And so whenever it comes to conflicts like this, and whenever it comes to resolving conflicts like this, especially when there's two sides and there's violence and all this fighting, it really does become very gray and very opaque and quite hard to really see what's going to happen next. But as you say, Lana, there's hope. There's an awful lot of hope, not only here in Ukraine, but indeed around the world, that some sort of agreement can be reached between Ukraine and Russia that can see this fighting stop once and for all.
It is incredible
Lana,
to see that hope from the Ukrainians. Thank you, Imtiaz.